Hello and welcome to episode 2 of Bread for Dough for the Man Hater Live or Die campaign. So what I'm going to make for you today is basically an apple oatmeal bread. I'm going to modify it by putting some spices in, putting some walnuts in also, and I think it's going to be really good. Okay, now for the dry ingredients, basically the flour, but since we have an extra ingredient today, we've got the oatmeal, we have to count that into that same volume. So remember, with this machine I'm using 2.5 cups of flour. So that's basically, depending on how much oatmeal flavor, I think I'm going to go with about half a cup of the oatmeal. So that leaves me with 2 cups of flour to mix between the wheat flour and the white flour. 1 1/4 of white flour. I'm going to top that off with the wheat flour, going up to the 2 cup mark with the wheat flour. So that gives me about half a cup of dry. I'm going to go half a cup of dry, add the oatmeal now. Now for extra flavor, I'm going to be adding a little bit of wheat germ. This is the inside of the wheat kernel. It basically kind of sweetens it up, gives it a little bit of wheaty flavor without giving it the woodsy. And finally, the other dry ingredients are going to be the salt and the sugar, same amount we talked about last week. Salt's going to be the same, 1 teaspoon, even though we're doing a sweet bread. Not a sweet bread in terms of like a zucchini or a banana bread, but just sort of a slightly sweet bread. But it brings out the flavor, so the same 1 teaspoon. Okay, now finally I'm going to add a couple of spices to this because I want to bring the flavor out in this one. An obvious one for apple is going to be cinnamon, and just going to add a nice sprinkle. That's probably about a half teaspoon. This really is to taste. And finally, one of my favorite spices here actually is nutmeg. I'm going to use a ground nutmeg, a fresh nutmeg that I ground fresh. Okay, then my last dry ingredient, we never want to forget this one, is the gluten flour. And because I'm using regular flour again, not bread flour, it's 6 tablespoons. Also, the gluten is one of the things that helps it rise. It holds it together as it rises. So you don't want to shortchange the gluten. When you get a heavier bread, when you've got more of a wheat, and in this case something heavy like the oatmeal, we make sure we have enough of the ingredients that make it rise. That would be the gluten, the egg whites, and of course the yeast itself. This particular one, remember, I'm going to add walnuts, my special ingredient. Just have these walnuts in a Ziploc bag. Anytime you're crushing something like that, it crushes to the bottom, so just crush it, flip it over. And do that a couple of times until you hit the size that you're looking for. I'm going to put those into the dry ingredients so it disperses nicely. If you get a really fancy bread maker, you might have a separate place on your machine to put things like nuts and raisins in it. It mixes it in at a slightly later stage. Okay, wet ingredients. I'm making it easy here. Working with applesauce, I just bought a couple, one of those packs of cups. You count this as the water volume. Let's put the applesauce in the cup first, measure that down, and then we'll top it off with water to hit that 3/4 of a cup. So it's just basically half a cup. We've got a little extra to snack on later. Top that off with water. Okay. Let's do our eggs. Okay. And finally, 4 tablespoons of oil. never seen before. So I'm looking for the analogy here between this unique loaf of bread and indie films. This is something the market doesn't provide for you. This is apple oatmeal walnut bread, something that nobody makes. So in indie films, you're going to see stuff that one person makes out of one person's vision, and that's something that general market just doesn't bring you. So, support indie film, please, and please support this campaign.